I've seen most of Washington, and I helped David Horton during his speed attempt on the Pacific Crest Trail, and then of course he set the record there. And it was definitely a trail I'm really intrigued by, but my wife and I started section hiking, the PCT, and that kind of has been our project. So I thought, why not mix it up? Why not do something different? And the Appalachian Trail, even though I'm not from the East Coast, I'm originally from the Midwest and the woods of Minnesota, felt like I really wanted to try something different. And the Appalachian Trail, of course, is probably one of the toughest footpaths out there in terms of its length and its ruggedness. So it really was a combination of those. And then as far as speed hiking and speed running or going for a fastest known time, for me, it's the best way that I know to test my limits. It's not what I want to do all the time, but if I want to really put myself out there and be on the edge, going for a record like that seemed like the ultimate challenge. And something too, I've prepped for 20 years of running ultramarathons and hiking and backpacking, and felt like I really wanted to have experience as well as wisdom.
Cool. So how much experience before you tried to set a record on the AT did you have with the actual trail? I mean, had you been on it here and there, or was it all new?
I maybe had seen 30 some miles. I'd seen the section, the JFK 50 miler does about 13 miles. It's the only organized ultra running event on the Appalachian Trail. I'd seen that section. David Horton took me on some of his sections up in outside of Lynchburg. I'd seen maybe a handful of miles there, and then near Shenandoah, I checked out the trail, and then in Vermont. So I really had only seen little bits. That's what made it too such a fun adventure, I think, for me. I didn't want to prep beforehand. I didn't want to know a whole lot because I really wanted it to be unknown and just have that true sense of adventure.
Right on. So you touched on how much experience do you have, like, let's say backpacking as opposed to ultra running or running on the trail? I mean, in more of a unsupported way rather than what mostly on the AT you were supported during the run.
Definitely. And I know a lot of people think of trail runners as these people who come from, say, running marathons and don't know a lot about backpacking. And I actually knew more about backpacking and wilderness travel prior to my ultra running career than I knew about running. Because I grew up in the woods in northern Minnesota. I grew up hunting and fishing and spending a lot of time, sleeping under the stars and quite frankly, just always in connection with the woods. So for me, I'd say I had probably, as much experience as I did, hiking, backpacking, and being in the woods as I did as running. And I think that kind of combination makes for a good skill set in doing something like an FKT on the Appalachian Trail.
Right on. So were there other people running out there as well? I mean, did you experience that? Of course, there's a ton of backpackers out there, but were there other people running the trail kind of while you were there?
I actually only ran, like, do you mean through hiking the whole thing or through running the whole thing or just sections or?
Any of those experiences?
Definitely people were out there running, those that had planned to come out and see me, of course. And that was one thing with this experience. I know it's kind of unique, and a lot of my running buddies as well as hikers who are out there were so shocked that I would make it so accessible to the public. And I think the reason that I did that is I wanted that kind of, the AT is a social trail, and you can't really hide from people because it's so embedded and connected with the communities that you go through, as well as people know about it who live even a couple hours away. So for me, I definitely wanted to make it an experience about connecting with people too. Some people kind of joke, they're like, gosh, it's like the Forrest Gump show, because sometimes I have 20 people running with me and hiking, and I had through hikers who would kind of like tag along and join, sometimes for a few miles. And I remember the longest I had a through hiker join me was 18 miles, and he was ready to get a resupply, and he had a lighter pack, and he's like, I'm going with you to when you stop for today, and you needed to get to a road crossing. And so I had a lot of those experiences. And then, of course, you have day users, people who are just out there running, who just happen to be out on a section and would see me. So, yeah, there's definitely a lot of runners who utilize the trail.
Right. So you did have a lot of experience. I mean, I know when I read about you doing it, and I knew that you were going to attempt it, and I kind of read about it. The vision was you just kind of flying by people and being completely by yourself out there. So that really wasn't the case, or was it kind of mixed up? Or what was your experience with the other people out there, the hikers?
I think that's the biggest misconception for the audience there, as well as the through hiking community. Anybody who got a chance to hike with me, I wasn't blazing the trail by any stretch. Anybody who knows the Appalachian Trail, whether you're hiking it or running it, it's a bugger of a trail, and it's going to slow you down and it's going to beat you up. So, for my purposes too, for instance, Jennifer Farr Davis, she's more of a hiker than runner. She's done some running. I myself, am a runner, but I knew going in I was going to be hiking a lot of that trail because day after day I was trying to put in 50 miles and sometimes even more than that. So I knew I couldn't run at a pace that I would run, say if I were going out for a 20 or 30 miler or just doing 100 miles in one shot. So the vision of me blazing by may have happened a few times when the trail got really smooth or in sections where it was just kind of rolly, but I would say 80% of the time I was power walking and very light jogging. It wasn't more than maybe 3.5, 4 miles an hour pace-wise. So a good day for me was hitting 3.5 to 4 miles per hour average. And it just meant that I was putting more time, just like Jennifer Farr Davis. Anybody who followed her or read about her experience, she was just out there for a long time. I was putting in 16 to 18-hour days, and then later, 20, 24-hour days to get the record. So, whereas a lot of through hikers, call it a good day at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., I would be going into 10 p.m., 11, even midnight in the early morning hours sometimes as the trail got more difficult.
Right. So, what kind of? Just as a side note, how many miles? I think I did it like you're talking 40, 50 miles a day.
Yes.
That's typical. Did you have did you have one day that was just kind of blew those away, or did you have any huge days?
Well, to make up, I lost a good day on my original plan due to injury. So I had a few days down in the south where I had only done 31, 37, and 39 miles because I literally had to hike those days due to my knee injury and quad injury. And I just hiked, all solid those days. And then as I got more running involved and basically rehabbed my knee and my quad, up in Pennsylvania, I was putting in 58-mile days. I did one 59-mile day. I was doing 56s. And so I really had to make up ground when the terrain got a little bit better. But anybody who's hiked Pennsylvania knows it's not easy in terms of rocks and terrain, but it was the best option for me to put in the big miles. So Northern Virginia and Pennsylvania is really where I try to pack in some of those 50 to 59-mile days. And again, on those rocks, it's not like you can blaze at a 6 mile an hour pace. I was just out there. I remember some nights coming in at 2 a.m. in the morning or 1 a.m. to finish those days off.
Right, and then my understanding, were you typically sleeping in your van or a hotel or?
So I'll give the breakdown because it's interesting. A lot of through hikers now end up staying in hostels, and as a percentage, I spent 4 nights in a real bed, meaning in a hotel or in a roof over my head besides the van. Otherwise, I was in the van or on the trail, and it wasn't until basically New Hampshire and Maine where I was actually sleeping on the trail, just because the way that the road crossings fell, as well as I was only able to get at most some nights 2 hours, sometimes 3 if I was lucky, or 4, just because again I was trying to beat that record. So
right. So you had the record in your mind every day. You were trying to gain ground on it.
Definitely, and there were days where I thought it was over. I said, okay, I'm just going to enjoy my last week here going through Maine. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen, and I had a lot of self-doubt. I think people think somebody like myself is always thinking, oh, I'm always going to break the record. I had the same self-doubts as a lot of through hikers do throughout the trail, thinking, am I going to get to the terminus? Am I going to get to Katahdin? Right. And there's so many things that can happen along the way, and I dealt with that same self-doubt that a lot of people do.
So of course, part of this is when you did it. You crushed the last kind of. I followed it, and you really sped up at the end a lot. And then you get up and you do it, you win, you take the record by 3 hours. And now we all know you got a few citations, I guess, either on top or you said at the base. Did you kind of expect any of that? Was there any expectation that some of the publicity that you were going to garner from this might be received in not such a positive way?
Well, I guess that's the big thing. A lot of people assumed in Baxter State Park, made it a really big deal that they were in communication with my crew. And again, I'm not saying we shouldn't have known the rules, but if you can imagine, I'm going through all these different states quite rapidly. And Jenny, my wife, and I, who it was just a small team, I think that was another misconception. It was this huge team. A lot of times I had one or two friends that would join us for sections. There were times where a lot of the locals would come out. And so it seemed like I had a lot of people out there, basically helping me. And I had like this huge camera crew, which, by the way, the video crew that was out there, they had approached me and said, hey, we're covering this documentary on athletes. Would it be all right if we followed you? And they basically joined me. It wasn't part of something I was producing. And so when I got to Baxter State Park, the camera crew that was following me for the documentary had been in touch with Baxter State Park, but I wasn't, or Jenny wasn't in touch with them at all. If we had heard beforehand, and I guess this is where the research might come into play, that Baxter State Park is known for its attitude towards through hikers, we would have definitely, I guess, changed maybe some of the things we did. But again, we were, for the most part, besides the final, champagne at the top, we were law-abiding. We had a group of 12. I did not litter. That's where the misconception. Again, if you spill a beverage that is something you can drink, it's not littering. But those were the two charges, and I didn't realize it was going to make it. I mean, that's the thing. I think in the end, they took an opportunity to use me to make an example about through hikers and initiatives that they had. It's unfortunate that I guess I didn't know about the drinking in public, and basically a buddy hands me a bottle of champagne, and
you just ran 2,100 plus miles. You're like, hey,
well, and that's again, I'm not trying to say I'm special or I'm above the law, but I was the only one who got a ticket, and there were people out there day hiking who had beers in their packs and they were enjoying beverage. And there were people in my crew as well as strangers we didn't know who took sips of the champagne, but I was the only one who got a ticket. So I'm all for, if I'm breaking a rule, I should, be accountable for that. But at the same time, I was the only one who got tickets. So that was quite a surprise. I didn't know anything about the Baxter State Park history. And again, we really operated in a fashion that I think was law-abiding, as well as being really sensitive to the trail. And we picked up. I didn't even leave any of my toilet paper on the trail, which a lot of through hikers are used to digging cat holes. And of course, I left human waste out there, but I packed all my toilet paper out. Jenny actually recycled all my energy wrappers. So, as far as a through hike that has a speed attempt attached to it, I think can be done very minimal impact. But again, the emphasis Baxter State Park really want to hit home is that through hikers, including myself, are basically a ruckus partying group that litters and doesn't really appreciate the land, which is very unfortunate.
Sure. Is there anything that I guess I haven't asked that you kind of want the Appalachian Trail community to kind of be aware of, other than what we covered?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that I think sometimes hikers and runners, trail runners, sometimes there's a divide there that I don't think should be. We're both foot users, and some people assume that if you're running on a trail or if you're trying to do a speed attempt, you don't enjoy it. And as I mentioned earlier, I had a lot of conversations. In fact, I stopped at shelters along the way, and maybe this was why I was battling within hours of the record at the end. But I really wanted to I signed registers, I hung out at shelters, talked to the through hikers, stopped for photos, and just asked them about their experiences as we'd hike on an uphill. They joined me, and it's just a different style, but it doesn't mean that I'm not out there enjoying things or that I'm just blazing the trail and just not saying. I saw the red F's crossing the trail, and I saw all the little salamanders, and I would smell everything. I had the spider webs hitting my face every morning, and because I was out there for so many hours each day, I got to experience the trail at basically all hours of the day, which was a unique experience. And I think people have this assumption that I wasn't enjoying it. And granted, I was in a lot of discomfort because I was sleep deprived towards the end, my muscles hurt, but I think a lot of
everybody's, I imagine everybody's nuts there, right?
Yeah, exactly. Everybody gets that point. So some people might question, well, why through hike? Or, why try to do the whole trail when you can day hike? And I think really we shouldn't be having that discussion. We should be banding together. Foot users such as trail runners, hikers. There's really not a divide. And I talked to Jennifer Farr Davis about this because she gets labeled